So today let's learn about sleep. And a study came out recently here from computational biology through PLOS. And this paper, the researchers are actually looking at how can they make artificial neural networks, so how can they make computers more efficient and less forgetful. And the way that they figured out how to do that was by using human models in the human brain. And so this paper is interesting because, oftentimes the world is trying to improve on humanity with computers. And this paper kind of went in reverse. They're like, how can we make our computers better by studying humanity? And so in computer networks and computation, there's this process called catastrophic forgetting, which essentially is that artificial networks overwrite previously learned tasks when they're trained sequentially. So if they learn A and then they learn B, they overwrite A with B, whereas humans can learn continuously and learns and so you don't necessarily learn a new thing today and overwrite something you learned in the past the way computers do. Why? Well, it turns out because of sleep. And sleeping between moments of learning helps you better remember. And so this is the paper that we're going to be reading a news article about. But real quick, from the authors of the paper, they just talk about, they state, artificial neural networks can achieve superhuman performance in many domains. Despite these advances, these networks fail in sequential learning. They achieve optimal performance on newer tasks at the expense of performance on previously learned tasks. So when they learn something new, they get worse at what they learned in the past. Humans and animals, on the other hand, have a remarkable ability to learn continuously and incorporate new data into their corpus of existing knowledge. So when we learn, we don't learn over something in the past, we learn in addition to that, right? So our knowledge base grows. Sleep has been hypothesized to play an important role in memory and learning by enabling spontaneous reactivation of previously learned memory patterns. Sleep makes this possible by replaying old memory traces without the explicit usage of the old task data. So that's the nerd speak of it, but let's go to the interview with the authors and see what they have to say in a little bit more layperson speech. So this article is on ScienceDaily.com, and it's called Artificial Neural Networks Learn Better When They Spend Time Not Learning at All. Depending on age, humans need 7 to 13. I haven't heard 13. That's a big number. That's probably kids and infants. But humans need 7 to 13 hours of sleep per 24 hours. During this time, a lot happens. Heart rate, breathing, and metabolism ebb and flow. Hormone levels adjust. The body relaxes, but not the brain. The author of the study says, quote, "The brain is very busy when we sleep, repeating what we have learned during the day. Sleep helps reorganize memories and presents them in the most efficient way. Sleep builds rational memory, the ability to remember arbitrary or indirect association between objects, people, or events, and protects against forgetting old memories." So, we have rational memory, we have the ability to remember arbitrary or indirect associations, and basically, to me, that's a way of saying we have pattern recognition. And pattern recognition is key. I've posted many times on social media that pattern recognition is a life skill. And if we've learned anything over the last 2 to 3 years, it's that recognizing patterns can save your life, or the inability to recognize patterns could mess up your life. And so your quality and quantity of sleep contributes to your pattern recognition via affecting your ability to remember arbitrary and indirect associations, right? So pattern recognition is the ability to see a pattern in something that maybe you're not an expert in, but because of your experience in another field and your ability to associate those two things, you might notice the pattern. So moving on. The human brain learns continuously and incorporates new data into existing knowledge, and it typically learns best when new training is interleaved with periods of sleep for memory consolidation. So whenever we're learning something, it's great to take a rest in between, right? So if you go to a 3-day seminar, obviously you're going to go, or hopefully you're going to go to sleep at night between the daily sessions, and that sleep in between sessions is as important and maybe more important than the actual sessions, because you're taking what you're learning and you're hardwiring it and committing it to memory, and the ability to use it in pattern recognition and things like that down the road. And I saw a paper recently, I don't have it up here today, but I saw a paper recently that said, just taking a 5-minute break when you're learning can help you better remember it down the road. So it doesn't always have to be, obviously we want to sleep at night, but at that 3-day seminar, usually they're broken into 45-minute to an hour blocks, and then you have a 5 to 15-minute break and a lunch in there. And those breaks are helping you better remember what you just learned the hour before, as compared to if you went straight into the next session. So how does the sleep help us remember better? Okay. Memories are represented in the human brain by patterns of synaptic weight, the strength or amplitude of a connection between two neurons. So that's a lot of scientific jargon, but if you look down here, if we're talking about nerves, okay, or neurons, we could draw it simply like this, okay. And you have another neuron here, the synapses, okay. So we have this synaptic bulb, and we have the dendrites, and then we have the space between neuron 1 and neuron 2 called the synaptic cleft. So what happens is you get a signal, or you learn something new, or you learn a new movement pattern, and neuron 1 is going to talk to neuron 2, and it does that through the synaptic cleft and through the dendrites, forming a synapse, okay, with this neuron 2. And so the strength of the connections is, the stronger the two neurons are connected, the stronger the memory is, or the more well you learned it, right? And this is a process I talk about in my book and in other videos called neuroplasticity. And essentially neuroplasticity means that neurons that fire together, wire together, or neurons that talk more, have a stronger relationship, right? You likely have a stronger relationship with people that you talk with more often than ones you talk with less often. And so neurons that fire together, wire together. This can apply to memorization and or learning book knowledge, but it also applies to movement patterns. So if you're playing a sport, the very first time you ever throw a baseball is not as good as the 1,000th time you throw a baseball, assuming that you're working to improve on your throwing technique with each of those reps. So in the same way that neurons fire together, wire together, improves your form on your baseball throw, studying your flashcards also strengthens those connections. But what the researchers are showing us here is that sleep continues that strengthening after the day is over. And so here we go. When we learn new information, neurons fire in specific order, and this increases synapses between them, or connections. During sleep, the spiking patterns learned during our awake state are repeated spontaneously. So while you're sleeping, your neurons are still studying. They're repeating, okay? This is called reactivation or replay. Synaptic plasticity, or the connections, can be altered or molded and is still in place during sleep, and can further enhance plasticity or synapticity patterns that represent memory, helping to prevent forgetting or to enable transfer of knowledge from old to new tasks. So augmenting sleep rhythms can lead to better memory, right? So if you're having memory issues, one of the first questions we should ask is, well, how's your sleep? Because if you're not sleeping well, if you're not having quality sleep and appropriate quantity sleep and appropriate different stages of sleep, then that may be contributing to your poor memory. And oftentimes it's the short-term memory that suffers, right? Not the long-term memory. So if you're having short-term memory issues, ask yourself how well you're sleeping and can you win in the sleep realm. And then this last quote will springboard us to the second part of this webinar. And it says, in other projects, the authors use computer models to develop optimal strategies to apply stimulation during sleep, such as auditory tones that enhance sleep rhythms and improve learning. Okay, awesome. So if I want to improve my memory, I can sleep more and better, potentially, depending on how my individual sleep is currently. But what if I have optimal sleep right now? Well, I still may be able to improve on that by using stimulation during sleep. In this case, we'll use the example of auditory tones to enhance sleep rhythms and improve learning. And these tones can improve sleep rhythm and learning, but they can also improve health and immunity, like we've spoken about in previous videos. So I'm not going to dive deeply into these papers, but we've talked about this paper in the past, Sleep and Inflammation, Partners in Sickness and Health, where we've talked about your sleep. If it's your sleep impacts many things, including your inflammatory status, your antiviral status, your insulin sensitivity, etc. And here's another paper that talks about the sleep immune crosstalk in health and disease, and says poor sleep can lead to poor immunity, and vice versa. Poor immunity can lead to poor sleep. So they're tightly interconnected, and I'll point you to previous videos to dive into those papers, or you can Google those papers and look them up yourself. But what I want to focus on today is what these authors were talking about and using auditory tones to improve your sleep rhythm and improve learning. So let's jump over to the web. And here we are on the internet. And so how can we use auditory tones to improve our memory, improve our health, improve our sleep, improve our focus, decrease our stress, etc.? Well, we can use sound at specific frequencies to do that. And so what I would point you to is to research a couple terms. One is solfeggio, and solfeggio frequencies are one thing to investigate. The other form are called Nogier frequencies, which are here. There's 7 Nogier frequencies, there's 9 solfeggio frequencies. The names are just the different names of solfeggio frequencies are based on historical frequencies discovered. I believe it was by the Hebrews to have certain impacts, and then the Nogier frequencies were developed and discovered by Paul Nogier, who was a French doctor that discovered and developed auriculotherapy. So if we just focus on the Nogier frequencies first, his are labeled by letters. So frequency A, and here's the specific hertz. So frequency is measured in hertz, and hertz is cycles per second. So if you've got a frequency of 292 hertz, that sound wave, is what we're looking at now. Okay, so if we have a sound wave that looks like this, okay, and the frequency is 292 hertz, then you're going to see this wave 292 times in a second. Whereas if the frequency is 584, that wave would be occurring 584 times per second. And the difference in 292 and 584 represent the different frequencies, right? You could have the same wave or the same wavelength, but different frequency. Sorry if it's a little sciencey, but I just want you to understand that the difference in these different sounds is the frequency. Okay, so I'll let you look at these sites. This is huelight.kr, and this lists the 7 Nogier frequencies, and you'll see that frequency A is related to cellular vitality. And what Dr. Nogier discovered is that there's 3 frequencies that resonate with specific parts of the body. Frequency A resonates with what's called the ectoderm, or the outermost tissue in our body. And the ectoderm forms the skin, glands, nerves, eyes, ears, teeth, brain, and spinal cord. So if you have issues with these areas, this could be a frequency that you listen to at night or during the day, whenever, maybe during meditation or prayer, to impact the cells and organs in those areas. The frequency B is related to the endoderm, which is the innermost tissues of our body, and that's the GI tract, lungs, bladder, urethra, and auditory tubes. And so again, if you have issues in those areas, this would be the frequency you'd want to focus on more. And then frequency C is the mesoderm, and that's connective tissue, ligaments, tendons, cartilage, muscle, bone. So this would be more like structural injuries. It also forms the heart, blood and lymph vessels, kidneys, ovaries, reproductive testes, spleen, and adrenal cortex. So you can use sound to impact the body beyond just memory, okay? But those three are tied to the body, and then you have frequency D, E, F, and G, which are tied to other things. So mind and body stress, frequency D would be what you want, helps balance the two sides of the brain. If you have a peripheral nervous system issue, you could use frequency E. Frequency F resonates with the lower regions of the brain, so the thalamus and hypothalamus, which help run the behind the scenes stuff and endocrine system and things like that. And then the frequency G, brain activation and intelligence. So this one is specifically used for memory, psychological disorders, and the cerebral cortex, or the awake part, the thinking, imagining, creating part of the brain. So relevant to our papers we were talking about earlier, frequency G is the Nogier frequency you'd want to listen to in your sleep to promote memory. That's the Nogier frequencies. If we look at the Solfeggio frequencies, there's 9 of these, and I'll just focus on the general uses of them. But the 174 hertz Solfeggio frequency is for relieving pain and stress and helping enhance concentration. So here's what it sounds like. So you could, download a 174 hertz Solfeggio frequency and listen to that, put it on quietly in some headphones or in some sort of stereo sound speakers while you sleep, and promote reduction of pain and stress. Okay. You can go on YouTube and just search these things. And here's a track that I was listening to earlier. It's 1 hour and 21 minutes. And this plays all 9 Solfeggio frequencies in order. So you could just play that and fall asleep and address everything that all 9 Solfeggios address while you're sleeping, which includes healing tissues and organs, liberating guilt and fear, okay, undoing situations and facilitating change. The new year's coming. If you want new beginnings, maybe you listen to the 417 hertz and remove negative energy. Right, the 528 hertz is transformation and miracles, which can awaken spirituality, they say. If you want to improve relationships, the 639 hertz can be useful, awakening your intuition and or dealing with chronic pain is 741 hertz. The 852 hertz is rebalancing your spirituality and consciousness, and the 963 hertz is the highest frequency, and they call it the frequency of the gods. It can create room for oneness and unity spiritually. So these are the auditory tones, and there's others, but these are 2 different types of them with research behind them that you could choose to use to not only improve your memory, but help you with pain or relationships or attitude, etc. So oftentimes, we think about having to go to a doctor or change our diet or swallow a supplement to help ourselves with our memory or with our pain. But research is piling up showing that frequencies, things like frequencies and magnetic fields and sound and light, like lasers, can all accomplish those things for us as well. We just have to be aware of it and know how to use them and then apply them. So I hope that this was interesting and stimulates you to do further research on your own.